Welcome to Stories Sustain Us, the podcast where we explore the power of storytelling to inspire action and create a more sustainable future. I'm your host, Stephen Shower, and today we're taking a journey to Scotland's borders to explore one of the most historically rich and ecologically significant river systems in the world, the River Tweed. For thousands of years, the Tweed has shaped both the landscape and the lives of those who call this region home. Today, the challenge lies in balancing the needs of agriculture, conservation, and recreation while adapting to the impacts of climate change. That's where passionate leaders like Derek Robeson come in. Derek is at the heart of the efforts to restore and protect the River Tweed. As a conservation manager at the Tweed Forum, he works alongside farmers, landowners, and communities to implement sustainable conservation projects. From whole farm nature conservation planning to managing invasive species, Derek's expertise in soil, water, and wildlife conservation is helping to shape a healthier future for the Tweed catchment. One of his most ambitious projects, the River Tweed Trail, a 100-mile footpath designed to enhance public access and foster ecotourism in the region. Beyond his professional work, Derek has a deep passion for environmental education, inspiring the next generation to connect with nature and understand the importance of conservation. Whether he's restoring historic landscapes, planting heritage trees, or mapping out Scotland's historic milestones, Derek's dedication to integrated farming, forestry, and conservation is truly remarkable. Now, I first learned about the incredible work happening on the River Tweed back in 2017 when I attended the International River Foundation's annual conference. That year, the Tweed was a finalist for the International River Prize, and I had the honor of meeting some of Derek's colleagues. It's an absolute pleasure to now sit down with Derek himself and dive deeper into the story of the River Tweed, its past, its future, and the people who are working tirelessly to protect it. So join me as we explore the fascinating journey of Derek Robeson and the vital conservation work being done along the River Tweed. Let's jump into this episode here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Well, hello, Dr. Robeson. Derek, how are you? I guess it's this afternoon for you over in Scotland. I think you're in Scotland. Is that correct? I don't know if you're on the Scotland side or the England side of the border there along the River Tweed.
Well, we're just on the border, Stephen, so we're about 5 miles from the English border here. So, yeah, we're right in the heart of the border country of Scotland, but hard up against the border with England. And It's about 3:30 in the afternoon with us, so a bit later in the day.
Yeah, it's 7:30 in the morning for me here in Seattle. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to learning about you and learning more about the River Tweed. So appreciate your time.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks very much for asking me. It's a real honor. Thank you.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I feel like I've been on a bit of a multi-year journey to get to this conversation. It's going back to 2016. My wife and I took a vacation and we were over in England and Scotland and we took the train from Edinburgh to London and trained over the River Tweed on that amazing, I think it's the Royal Border Bridge. So beautiful. I remember telling my wife as we were going over the river, like we got to come back here. Why didn't we stop here? This is so beautiful. So so from 2016. I met a few of your colleagues in 2017 in Brisbane, Australia, when the River Tweed was a finalist for the International River Prize. So, again, kind of getting closer to you.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. Well, we were over the year before because I think you've come into contact with a colleague of mine, Tom Allison, over in New South Wales in Tweedshire Council. So we went over to see Tom in 2016, and of course our director Luke and Chris went over in 17. So yeah, it's a small world, as they say. It's amazing the people you meet. And Tom was a wonderful host to us. He really was. We can touch on that later. He really was a wonderful host.
Yeah. Well, and I met Tom through the International River Foundation, and I interviewed him a few last fall. He was episode 16, and he was kind enough to put us together. So it's been this long, small world journey, like you said, to get to this conversation. So
absolutely.
Well,
Well, look,
Derek, tell me a bit about you. Where did you grow up? What's your story? And then we'll jump into the River Tweed together.
yeah, well, we're sitting here in Kelso. Kelso's in the heart of the Tweed catchment, about 18 miles west of Berwick, that bridge you talked about, so right in the heart of the valley. I was born here in the early 60s, so I haven't got that far. I've been away when I was studying, but came back. The draw of home was quite strong. So just to put the geographic context of the Tweed catchment, we're hard up against the English border on our south side in Northumberland.
Yeah.
To the east, we've got the North Sea in Berwick. To the north, we've got Edinburgh. And to the west, we've got Dumfries and Galloway. So that's the kind of geographical context upon which we sit. I've been fortunate to live here most of my life and work here for the Tweed Forum. I'm now conservation manager, so we've got 18 staff doing a variety of projects right across the catchment. The catchment's really interesting, geographically. It's the most amazing place. It's just like a horseshoe of hills. The southern hills are the Cheviates, the western hills are the Moorfoots, the northern hills are the Lammermoors. Open end of this kind of horseshoe to North Sea, and it's the most beautiful agricultural landscape, and that's the landscape in which we grew up. I went to school here. I went off to university, but I'm really interested in history, in local history, and conservation is what I've ended up doing. But we thank our parents. I've got two brothers.
Yeah.
One lives in the Borders, one lives in Edinburgh, and we're all really interested in environment. But we do thank our parents for that. My mother was an accountant. My father was, after he came out of the Navy, was a mink farmer of all things. In the days when mink coats were, real mink coats were popular, but obviously they became less popular in the 60s and 70s. So
Sure.
The market dropped out of that. And he became a bowyer of all things. He made archery equipment, old English longbows, and target archery bows and field archery bows. But in his spare time, he took us out into the countryside. So we spent a lot of time down on the coast, the Northumberland coast, Bamburgh Castle, lots of castles in the border. Bamburgh Castle. He loved his birds, We saw lots and lots of birds. Took us down to the Hirsal estate in Coldstream a lot to see the birds. You're up into the hills, hill walking. So we kind of got into conservation, all of us, that way.
Yeah.
And he was also, he loved guiding, taking people out. And I remember one time he took us to the Hirsal estate down at Coldstream. Beautiful estate, big country house, lots of parkland and lakes. And my brother was with me. Went down to the river, and it was a group from the American Audubon Society.
Yeah.
In the mid-70s, and
so you were an early teenager at this time?
I was probably early teenager. I'd be about 12 probably.
Yeah.
And he went down, brother went down, and all these Americans stood on the bridge with massive lenses like this. We'd never seen lenses like them, They were a great crowd. And this bird took off, like a woodcock took off and flew up over the bridge and landed behind a tree. And he shouted that it was carrying a chick. And nobody really believed him, because these birds are supposed to carry chicks under their legs when they take flight, but nobody actually filmed it or photographed it. And all these folks were standing with lenses this size, and nobody got to photograph it. Well, this bird came back again, picked up another chick, and flew off with this chick. And you saw these four legs dangling underneath. It was really quite spectacular. But these kind of things, you remember, you don't forget these things.
Yeah.
They're quite interesting.
What a great experience.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah, I feel like I was there kind of imagining it happen. So what a great experience.
And another time we're down at the Hirsal house, and we used to ring the swifts. These swifts used to fly off, from, well, they come down from Africa to Britain and then fly back. And this bird would do, this one single bird that we ringed was doing about 3.5 million miles over its 25-year lifespan. And the owner of the house had ringed it over a period of 25 years. And he reckoned it had done that kind of mileage. It was incredible. And it was actually monogamous. They only had 3 mates in that time. But I was the smallest in the group, so I had to lean out the windows, lean over the windowsill, pick up the nest box top, and then find these little chicks in the box, bring them out and ring them. And this one time I stuck my hand in the box and I thought, this is not quite right. And it was full of there's a wasp nest in it.
Oh, no.
You can imagine how quickly I pulled back and came back in the windowsill. But yeah, you're a bit weary after that. But it was a great experience.
Oh, no.
You don't forget these days.
Escape unharmed, or did you get...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Very, very sharp entry back into the window, by the way.
Yeah.
It was...
Never moved so quick, I'm sure.
Never moved so fast. But that's where it all stems from, all these interesting experiences as a child,
Yeah, and I imagine that love of history with all the old castles and all of the old stories, everything just kind of intertwines there. Your love of conservation and love of history, you were absorbing it like every moment of your childhood, it sounds like.
It is. Well, it is, because the catchment, it is an interesting catchment because it has our human history goes back at least 5,000 years, maybe 6,000 years. And one day when I was walking across the farm, I don't know if you can see this, but I picked up this little Neolithic axe.
Yeah.
I probably should have handed it in, but I think museum drawers are
We
full
won't
of these kind
tell
of things.
anybody. Yeah, your secret's safe.
And if it's the most beautiful thing, and that's probably
Wow.
6,000 years old. And it's that kind of thing. Well, if that's 6,000 years old, I worked it out. If a generation's about 30 years, that's 180 generations of people have lived between the last person that picked it up and me. And it's that kind of thing that really inspires you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And and then through the catchment, you've got this like the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and of course the Romans. The Romans came here.
Sure.
They were here for a long time, for 400 years, built a massive hill fort north of Hadrian's Wall here.
Yeah.
And the natives wouldn't be friendly then. The Vikings came, the Normans came, and they built their abbeys here, Kelso, Jedburgh, Dryburgh, a great medieval kingdom here. And then 5 kings lived just across the river here. David I of Scotland, Malcolm IV, William I, Alexander II, Alexander III, they all lived here, and it was quite a lawless period in Scottish and English history. And of course you've got the English border runs right through the middle of the catchment, which is probably the oldest land border, or one of them in the world. It's over 1,000 years old. So you've got all that history coming together, and you just add on the environment to that, and it's quite a spectacular place.
Yeah. Well, I'm already booking my trip in my brain. A few weeks ago, I talked with Jenny Barlow, and she's from the Terrace Valley Nature Reserve, kind of a neighbor of yours, and different catchment, but a nearby neighbor of yours, and she was a great interview. And I already mentioned to her that I'll come work for her. So if you got work for me over there, I'll make a work trip out of it, and because it just sounds so beautiful and appealing, and I love history as well as nature, and so everything you just talked about, my wheels are like, when can I get there and see all of this in person? Because it just sounds spectacular.
Well, I think too that it's not just a landscape that inspires us as conservation advisors to farmers. It's inspired people over the years. I mean, this is the landscape that Walter Scott grew up in. John Buchan, of 39 Steps fame and Governor General of Canada, he came from here. Lord Sweetsmuir, James Hogg, Netrick Shepherd, Walter Scott I've mentioned. Lots and lots of poets. They took inspiration from this landscape. And Abbotsford is just along the road below the Eildon Hills where Trimontium, the Roman fort, was. So lots and lots of people have just been inspired by this landscape and the history of it.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about your history then. So you're a young child, a teenager. You're exploring this area with your family. You're seeing all of these things firsthand. You eventually imagine go off to university, or what's kind of next in your life journey?
Yeah, I was never very academically minded at school. I was, I think my report card would always say could try harder, but we managed to get through school just to 6th year, and I enjoyed biology, enjoyed geography, enjoyed history and the sciences. So anyway, I ended up going to Sheffield University. You had to go to an English university in these days rather than a Scottish one if you didn't have a language. I didn't have French or German was what they taught us at school, and I failed German badly, so I ended up in an English university in Yorkshire and Sheffield. It was wonderful. It was a great experience. And I ended up doing geology and zoology and botany, environmental sciences, and then majored in the final year and honours year doing geology.
Geology, okay.
Yeah, and then ended up doing a master's there in Sheffield in micropaleontology, and then went over to Dublin, to Trinity College in Dublin in Ireland.
Nice.
To do a PhD in petroleum exploration geology, looking at source rock potential for oil and gas off the Celtic Sea Basin, the Donegal Basin off the west coast of Ireland. But I was going through that process in my life, and it was very much exploitative, very much exploration geology, very much production, very much.
Sure.
And my heart really wasn't in it. I had to say I was much more about conservation and wildlife and try to conserve things rather than try to exploit things. So I was never that comfortable with it, to be honest. So I left Ireland in probably 89, came over to Edinburgh, did some postdoc work at Edinburgh University, and and from there decided that what I really wanted to do was get into conservation. So we volunteered then with the Scottish Wildlife Trust, who had a conservation team in the Borders, and myself and my colleague who ended up working with, Hugh Chalmers. We both started on the same day as farm conservation advisors way back in 1995 at the local agricultural college, so we're very lucky. And we spent our life just walking farms, making suggestions for conservation, where you plant some native trees, where you put hedges, where you put ponds. It's a privilege to be invited onto people's land holdings and farms. It is a real honor, and then try and help the farmers deliver conservation
helping
products
them
on the
stay
ground.
productive with their land, but also trying to do it in a way that's healthier for the surrounding environment is what I'm imagining you were doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have such a diverse range of habitats here. I think if you took the borders, the Tweed Valley would be about 5,000 square kilometres.
Okay.
About 86% that's in Scotland, 14% is in England. In land use wise, it's about 20% commercial conifer in the west side of the catchment. It's about 20% heather moorland, which is interesting because heather, you'll be aware of heather moorland, but I think Scotland or the UK at least has 75% of the world's heather. So we're honour bound to look after it, maintain it, and manage it for perpetuity, if you like. About 20% of the catchment's arable and 40% is grass, whether it's pastoral, by improved grass or hill grass. So these are the kind of habitats we're looking at, really.
Sheep and cows on the grassland.
Big sheep farming country. Lots of mixed units with cows as well, Aberdeen Angus, beef, cattle. In the hills, we might have more traditional breeds like Lings, and some 150 Dexters, some Galloways that are outwintered, but a lot of them will be on the lower, better land, the cattle. But the top of the hills will be very much sheep farming. And they'll have 1,000 years of sheep, right back to the days of the abbeys we mentioned, the medieval monks were big pastoralists,
Sure.
So it's a long history.
Yeah. So how long then did you spend? You started in 95 with the Scottish Wildlife Fund?
Well, I was there sort of 93 to 95 with the Scottish Wildlife Trust doing volunteer work. And then we got in, Hugh and I, about late 95 into the Farming Wildlife Advisory Group, which were the conservation advisors based at the local agricultural college. And I probably spent the next 15 or so years there, going on to farms. So it really was a wonderful experience. And then moved on after that to the Scottish Agricultural College. They had a consultancy wing. In the same office, and they took me on as an environmental consultant, and that was very much about environmental appraisals, whole farm planning, that kind of thing, pulling it all together. And then about 12 years ago, I moved over to Tweed Forum, where I am now. I was invited over by our director to look at helping them with stakeholder engagement on a land use strategy pilot. The government wanted to look at a mapping tool that might help farmers look at opportunity mapping. Not just for farming, but for forestry and conservation. And where's opportunities for diffuse pollution control? Where's opportunities for more native woodland planting? Where's opportunities for, habitat linkages and corridors and all that. So it's very much about integrating using mapping-based tools, which is really exciting.
GIS tools to overlays and everything.
All of that stuff.
Sense.
So, and that's kind of where we're at now. And the organization's grown from, when I joined it 12 years ago, 4 or 5 staff to about 18, 19 staff now. Doing a variety of things from like peatland restoration to peat bogs. You'll be familiar with them, but we've quite a lot of peat bogs in Scotland. But they're great carbon sinks, they're just made up of sphagnum and moss, and we're very much about getting them wetter, basically blocking the hill drains and reprofiling the peat hags so the moss doesn't blow away basically and dry out, stores of carbon.
I'm assuming over the years, were they being intentionally water diverted to dry them out to help expand agricultural land, or just climate change is drying them out, or what?
They're at such a high elevation, Stephen. Usually they're quite high up in the hill, so it's quite wet. So you've got the natural elements that are eroding them. But then you've got grazing pressures as well, mostly from sheep rather than deer and things like that. So it's kind of a combination of grazing pressure
so it's
and
balancing the agricultural needs and the environmental needs.
And some drainage work as well. There was a lot of hill drains went in 200 years ago, the time of the Enclosure Acts, Victorian days. There was lots of grants for drainage, so they went in then. And we're trying to undo some of that now. Put it back to nature.
Yeah, that's part of the joy of this show that I get to do is talk with folks like you around the world who are undoing the best thinking of previous generations because now we know better. We have better ways of thinking. We can balance these different pressures instead of just trying to dominate nature. We can work with nature, and it's always great to hear stories like yours about we're undoing something from 200 years ago.
Yeah, and we're doing things like, re-meandering rivers as well. So my colleagues, and it's very much a partnership that we're working, and I'm just a messenger here today, but we're such a team, that close-knit team that really, they're really incredibly driven and gifted people, all of them. So we have 2 or 3 that do river restoration, and they concentrate on, rivers that were canalized, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
They're busy putting the meanders back and taking down the flood banks and reconnecting it with the flood plains and that kind of thing. So it's really quite exciting. Lots and lots of ponds are going in. We'll put in 300 ponds over the last 10 years. Wetlands as well. So the driver for these is very much natural flood management. We have a big problem with, as you probably do, and you see it on the news. I mean, some of these storms that we're getting over recent years are biblically horrendous. And you see that you can't believe what you're seeing.
Yeah.
But we're getting these extremes as well. So we're trying hard to work with farmers just above the towns that flood in the borders, above Peebles and Selkirk and Galashiels, and work with the farmers to try and slow it down.
Yeah.
And by
are you experiencing kind of the same that I'm familiar with here in many parts of the states that I've had personal work experience in, the changes of longer periods of dryness punctuated by shorter periods of intense rain? Is that kind of what's happening in your area as well? Similar changing weather patterns?
Very much. I mean, the seasonality seems to have kind of gone from it, you know, and when we get rain, we get a lot of rain. And you don't imagine droughts with being associated with Scotland, but in actual fact, not so much last year. Last year was a wet year for us, but a couple of years before that, the springs were incredibly dry. I think both springs, the 2 years before that, were so dry we didn't see much rain for the first 3 months of the spring, and they were getting concerned about water levels, reservoir levels, and that's kind of unheard of. And people were actually experiencing wildfires, on the Scottish moors and further north. And that, you think, well, in Scotland, is that really a problem? But well, yes, it potentially could be.
We're here in the Pacific Northwest. It's similar to Scotland temperature-wise and climate-wise. People don't. I don't think they would assume droughts and those kind of problems here in the Seattle area and Pacific Northwest. But we're still, some parts of the area here are still in drought conditions. So we're hopeful that the La Nina that's changing weather pattern will actually bring us some good rain and snowpack this winter, because we're down. We need it.
Really, I know. And it seems to be the story of the world over, doesn't it? That things are becoming much more extreme, and I guess a lot of what we're doing for natural flood management will help in times of drought as well. It'll store water. It'll allow the farmers places where they can get access for water for their animals. Because what we found a few years ago in one of the droughts was that the only place that the farmers could get feed for their animals was to open up the woodland plots, if you like, and let the animals graze under the trees.
Go in there.
That's the only place the grass really was. All the other grass had been burned off, and again in the Scottish Hills, that's pretty much unheard of. So it's just a sign of the times.
It is, sadly, but there's work to do.
There is work to do, Stephen.
We've got things to do and people to inspire to join us. So
exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So tell me, I've got one more question about your past real quick. Actually, I'm going to take 2 questions about your past real quick before we transition into the Tweed Forum. But first question about growing up, and it's just my curiosity. Was it football or rugby or something else?
Rugby.
Rugby was yours.
This is a home rugby.
Yeah, exactly. I was assuming rugby, but I'm a football guy. Yeah, European, like the right kind of football guy. So soccer over here, but I follow big English Premier League and all the European top leagues. But I figured you were a rugby guy. But I wanted to, just for the fun of it, clarify, were you football or rugby? So
no, rugby's in our blood. My grandfather was a professional rugby player. He was one of the early professional. and he played rugby league.
Yeah.
He played for Kelsey and Jedburgh before the First World War, actually, believe it or not. And
Wow.
then he went professional in about 1912, 1913. He played for Oldham down in Lancashire. Of
Yeah.
course, he was blackballed by the local clubs because they were amateurs, and he turned professional. He was
Yeah.
making a wage out of that, and he didn't like it. So, but he did really well, and then he went off, First World War broke out, and then he went off to war after
Yeah.
that, which is a different story altogether. But yeah, so rugby's
Yeah.
kind of in our blood. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Well,
much.
thank you. I just had to, I had to know. I had to know.
Yeah.
Well, the other kind of more career-oriented question I was pondering as you were telling me your story, when you were at the agricultural college for that 15 years helping farmers and landowners, were you also teaching at that time, or was it mostly just working with the landowners and
It
helping
was,
educate them, if you will,
yeah,
help them?
it was quite a varied job, Stephen. We did mostly advisory provision is what we did, but we held
Yeah.
workshops for farmers. We did a lot of talks in the evening. We went out into the local communities and we talked about the work we were doing and the good work that farmers were doing
Yeah.
to help with conservation. So
Community education.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it wasn't formal teaching as such, but it was all part of our remit. So we
Yeah.
did a heck of a lot of community engagement, and
Perfect.
we still do.
Yeah.
Frankly, yeah, it's really
Yeah, that's
quite.
so
It's a really
important.
rewarding part of it, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
meeting with the public and just showing them, because they're so amazed about what they just don't know what's happening a lot of the
Yeah.
time, and they're
Yeah.
quite in admiration of what is actually happening, what farmers are doing, because they do get quite a lot of negativity flung their way. But in actual fact, a lot of them really want to do the right thing. They're
Of
really
course.
interesting people with families to feed, and they're producing food certainly, but they're also wanting to produce a nice healthy landscape to live in and bring their children up and their next
Yeah, and
generation up. And
legacy
so
to pass on to future
exactly,
generations, and yeah, yeah.
so
I've found farmers and ranchers are often some of the most ardent and passionate conservationists,
yeah,
even though, like you said, they don't always get that
yeah,
reputation, but
they
they
don't.
really are.
And I wonder here whether it's not so much the farmers that are the problem with conservation as much as the policies. I would say their policies
Yeah,
are not
yeah,
always the right ones.
that
So
makes
the
sense.
farmers, will follow the policies, but if the policies are not maybe in balance, then
Yeah,
you can't really blame them. The policies need to be looked at more properly. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. That's a great insight. So. Well, so let's transition into
Mm,
the Tweed Forum.
mm,
You mentioned, briefly touched on, but tell
mm.
everybody what exactly is the Tweed Forum, and then maybe we can jump into some of the good work that you've been doing there for the last dozen years or
Yeah.
so. So what is the Tweed Forum?
The Tweed Forum is an environmental charitable trust that was established about 30 years ago, just over 30 years ago, to help farmers basically deliver environmental projects on the ground. So our director, Luke Cummins, he started it way back in the mid-90s. He still leads the organisation. So yeah, it's really grown organically over that time. So it started very much in response to the local bottom-up approach and demand for advice in river works, essentially. People going into the river and extracting gravel, that kind of things, and
Hmm.
people maybe not really doing the right thing at the right time, perhaps. And it kind of stemmed from that, and then the idea was to try and build a project round river type works and conservation on the river. So Luke then put together a big nature restoration bid through the Heritage Lottery Fund at the time,
Okay.
and that was successful. So it allowed people to be taken on and to deliver environmental projects on the ground at that time. But it grew very organically, from the bottom up rather than from the top down. So I think that's what's given us the success over the years, is that we've just responded to the demand that's been there. Because other folks in other parts of the country have kind of tried to do similar things to the Tweed Forum, but we seem to almost be unique. Probably because we've been around for so long and it's
Yeah.
grown organically slowly, that it's been stable and successful and quite effective, really,
Yeah.
at delivering. And it's not top down to say, it's very much bottom up. It's what the locals want, it's what the farmers want, it's what the
That's so
communities
important.
want. And you go where the funding streams are. So you tend to be steered and driven by, well, if some government agency wants to do something in this catchment, we know the farmers that will be interested. We know if we have a pot of money, we know we'll be keen to spend it, how we can spend it, who
Yeah.
will be interested in doing this. So we're well connected with the farming community that way. So we're quite, yeah, we're well connected. So therefore we can spend the monies as they become available for whatever the driver is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you finding those funding streams from both the Scottish government and the English government, given the catchment
Yeah.
does have, I think you said 14% or so of it was in
Yeah,
England. Are you
in
getting
England.
funding from both governments? And
Absolutely.
yeah, good.
We have got, let's say, 18 odd staff, so it's a right melting pot of funding streams. It's Scottish government money, it's English government money, it's Heritage Lottery Fund money, it's Wind Farm Mitigation Fund money, it's
Okay.
Scottish Environment Protection Agency, Scottish Natural Heritage, or Nature Scot as it is now, the local authorities, the local councils, Northumberland County Council, Scottish Borders Council. So it's a real mix. And
Yeah.
one of our biggest projects of late, again, we've taken on quite a few staff for this one, led by Luke Fisher, who's the manager of it, is a Tweed Trail. We're trying to put a Tweed Trail
Yeah, I was going to
all the
ask
way
you about
down.
that. It's a 100-mile
Yeah.
trail that
Yeah.
you're. Yeah, tell me more about that. That was one of the projects I wanted to dig deeper into. I'm glad you kind of transitioned into that. That was one of my questions. Like, tell me about this 100-mile trail. It sounds fantastic.
It is amazing. It came out of an idea, I think, a few years ago. Someone at the local council and a local MP were walking down the river, and they found it quite difficult actually getting along the river because it wasn't that easy, frankly.
Sure.
So they had this great idea of maybe setting a footpath in place and encouraging people to come to the borders. It is a money generating thing as much as anything, but just for people's enjoyment, it's a walking destination as much as anything else. So anyway, so they were looking around for agencies to lead on this, and they approached Tweed Forum, and Tweed Forum was more than happy to help with that. So it's taken a number of years to get it going, but now we're up and running. It's a multi-million-pound project, over £25 million now. So what we're trying to do is link up all the existing path networks along the river by creating new ones between, and then in the back of that, and delivering environmental projects all the way along the river. So it's more of kind of what we do.
Yeah.
It's more native woodland. It's more, there's new ones in there like pollinators along the Tweed. It's looking at wildflower meadows and wildflower grasslands.
Yeah.
We've got an education officer now that goes into schools and talks to the children about, farming, forestry and conservation, how important it all is that we get these in balance. And Jenny's very, very good at talking about that, especially to primary school children. But we do a lot of university-led courses as well. They come into the catchment from Edinburgh, both at the degree level and the master's level, and sometimes PhD level for topics. And now we're getting into secondary schools as well. They're coming to visit us at our office at Old Melrose to do geographic studies, higher geography and higher biology, looking at the river and the species in the river. So we're hitting quite a lot of different age groups, which is great. So that's really rewarding, that particular side of it.
Yeah.
And I think the younger you can speak to the children, the primary school children, the more chance you have of really engaging with them in the environment and really instilling some enthusiasm in them.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And I've learned over the years too, if you can get the kids engaged, the kids can also then in turn get their parents engaged. So that's another way into the adult population, is by inspiring the children to go home and talk about what they learned and everything. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. So along this 100 miles of the river, is it all privately owned, and you're dealing with a patchwork of agreements with private owners, or is it a mix of public-private?
It's a kind of mix, Stephen. It's a lot of it is on private land, but the bulk of the landowners are really very enthusiastic, very helpful.
Good.
What we're trying to do is use as much of the existing path network as possible, but some of it, veers away from the river naturally because of issues. Some of it uses the old railway. There used to be an old railway ran along the river. And it makes sense just to use the infrastructure that's there. And this will be a multi-use path, so it'll take not just walkers but cyclists, horse riders, mobility scooters even. It'll take everyone and everything. So it's quite an undertaking. Some of the sections have to be surfaced, to take these different access routes, if you like. So some of it's a bit more tarmacadam than you'd like, perhaps, and others are a bit more natural. But it's just to take the footfall, really. But I think nature is a great way of reclaiming that land. So very quickly after it's been done, nature takes over, and it looks a lot less raw, as it were. So now we're really excited about this, and I think we started in 2022. We're hoping to finish in 2027, which is not that long away.
Not that far away,
And then there'll be an official opening, hopefully around 28 or something. So, we're hoping it to become one of the great trails in Britain. We've got the Pennine Way, which comes up the stem of England to Yettam, just about 10 miles south. We've got the Southern Upland Way, we've got St Cuthbert's Way. I mean, none of these has been quite as popular as the West Highland Way and things like that up the west coast of Scotland. These have been really popular. But we're hoping, with the history and if we promote it well, that we might get, some added value there.
Yeah.
Because it's a very rural area.
Ecotourism and other things that might come along with that. Exactly. Finding those multi-benefit. You're helping the environment. You're helping local economies. You're helping landowners. I mean, all of these things all packaged into one project. So every dollar spent on that project is going to have multiple returns in different areas. So those are the types of projects that are just so exciting to be a part of and to learn about.
Yeah, they really are. They really are. So it's a challenge, but it's a good one, and everyone's up for the task. So
yeah. Well, I'll be following it in the years to come, and hopefully get a chance to set foot on it one of these days myself. I'm serious. The wheels are still turning. I got to get there.
So. You'll be very welcome.
Yeah. So I know I looked at the Tweed Forum's website, and it's tweedforum.org, and I'll make sure to include that in the show notes so people can find you as well. Really nice website, a lot of great information available, and I think you got, in addition to this 100-mile footpath that you're working on, there's I think 13 or 14 other projects that you're working on. So that's a considerable amount of work for 18 staff members across an entire catchment. So are there any other projects that stand out to you as something that you want to highlight or brag about?
I mean, we mentioned the Meadows project. That's a really interesting one. We've got an archaeological project where we're trying to promote the history of the area in there. We've got an invasive species project, which is looking at controlling things like Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, American skunk cabbage, that kind of thing. And we've been pretty effective over the last 30 years. It's taken over maybe £1.5 million to do it, and a full-time officer for that time to do it. But it really has been very, very effective. And the Tweed catchment is it's just a kind of leader in that kind of field, really. Because if you go up into the Lothians, up towards Edinburgh, and the Lothians, there's much more of these weeds around, so they're not really controlling it. And what we're finding now is that law of intended consequences. You do one thing somewhere and it has an impact somewhere else. But what they've done is they've put a new railway line in between Waverley and Edinburgh, right down to Gala Shields. And because it's fenced off, it's kind of brought down the invasive species down and back in the Gala water cushion, back into Tweed that way. So it's a constant battle.
It is. Invasives are
a real thing, and I know Tom Allison was talking about in Australia, was talking about invasives, and we can talk about Tom and that encounter. But it is a real challenge. And it's not something you can turn your back on. If you grasp the nettle, as it were, you've got to keep grasping it, because once you let go, the seeds are just going to come back, and they're just going to be there, and you have to kind of invest for the long term. Like a lot of conservation, you have to invest for the long term.
Absolutely. And when you're doing that conservation work and doing the replanting of native species as you're rustling up the soil and the land, that also then becomes the perfect, opportunity for those invasives to get in. So it's really that challenge when you're trying to replant the natives and rewild a place, fighting off those invasive species who are just as eager to get to that freshly tilled land and freshly fertilized ground and nicely watered, and everything you're doing to the restoration.
I know
it is a constant fight. So,
and I do take my hat to Emily. Emily leads our invasive species project, and she's really good at it and good at getting people on board, because we can't do it ourselves. Obviously, there's so few of us. So you have to work with farmers. You have to work with
I was going to ask you about
the river beat owners, and the gillies, the ones that take the fishers out, salmon fishers, because it's a big salmon fishing river, obviously, the Tweed. And you will see swathes of things like Himalayan balsam just covering the bankside, and of course if that gets a grip, then it chokes out all the native plants.
Everything.
So what Emily's been doing under license is she's got a little rust fungus that she can release onto the plants, and it's a sort of natural biological control, so it doesn't actually kill it, but it'll suppress the growth, so it doesn't flower and seed, and slow it down. It'll let some of the native plants come up between. So we do a lot of that, and we're monitoring it, and it's proving effective as a natural biological control. The worry, of course, it would be that it would jump plants, but it hasn't. It hasn't, and we're fairly optimistic that it won't. Trials have shown in England that it hasn't. So, but people are wary of that kind of thing. But then the alternative to that is chemical. Do you want to use a lot of chemical by the river? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. So, those are the same challenges. My previous job, I spent 15 years working on one of the larger ecosystem restoration projects along a river in an urban part of the United States, and that constant battle between, obviously chemicals can be very effective, but they also have, as you said, unintended consequences, and then certainly the runoff that is going to happen when it rains to get into the river, and the damage that it can do to aquatic plant life and aquatic species. So it's a lot of manual labor. It's a lot of mechanical manual labor to battle these invasive species. So I kudos to you all for having one person lead this big fight, and it sounds like recruiting and educating citizens, landowners, interested parties, in educating them on how to help contain and maybe remove it, because it is a very labor-intensive job.
It really is, Stephen. I think it is. And as I say, once you grasp on it, you've just got to keep hold of it and just keep going. But I think it's worth it, because a lot of the catchment management groups have taken the view that we're just going to have to live with these plants, and maybe that's the right way. But we feel we don't want to give up the fight just yet. We just want to keep going.
Yeah, you may never get rid of them all. So in one sense, living with them is reality, but still containing them and minimizing the spread is critically important, because living with them in a small way is one thing. Living with them where they dominate everything and choke out the natives and harm the rest of the ecological area, because like you said, there's domino effects. If the native vegetation along the shoreline is getting damaged, then that's going to have impacts on the salmon, undoubtedly, as they're trying to those native vegetation and trees and shade and everything is so important for their spawning and their life cycle. So all these things are connected, so we can't let.
And it's interesting you mentioned there the salmon stream, because it is such a big economic driver for us.
Sure.
I think someone did some statistics recently. Something like it's worth about £25 million to the Borders economy every year. 400 people probably employed in the back of it. But what the Tweed Foundation, the Fisheries Trust here, are finding is that the water temperatures are increasing radically. So up in the headwaters,
we're finding the same thing here.
Yeah, same thing. And of course, salmon are cold water loving fish, and they don't like warm water. So, they're really suffering. So what we're doing is planting lots of riparian woodland along the river and buffer zones, just to try to shade the river. So we're seeing a big increase in that. So we're planting, aspen and willow and alder and birch along the river to try and tackle that. So we just need to be doing more of it and quicker and at a larger scale. It's a scale thing, and we talk about the biggest challenges of our time are biodiversity loss and global warming, and they probably are. But it's the scale at which we need to work to address this is scary, frankly. So, and we're doing it very piecemeal. We're doing it just where opportunities exist, but we need a much more, especially in Scotland, I don't know what it's like in America, but in Scotland we need that much more coordinated approach to this, like the farmers working with the foresters, working with the conservationists, because they are a little bit in silos still here at the minute. We need them to be working in partnership and understanding each other's issues and challenges. So that's where we come in, actually. We try and bridge these gaps as much as possible. But it's a scale thing. And another project you mentioned about the River Tweed Trail. Another one we're doing is it's a really lovely one, actually. I'm leading on that one. It's really, really enjoyable. It's a designed landscapes project. So we've got lots of country houses down the river with these parkland settings. You can imagine places like Abbotsford, where Walter Scott lived, or Traquair House. Traquair House at the top of the catchment around Peebles. It's the oldest inhabited house in Scotland, probably. It's welcomed something like 27 kings through its door since the 1100s, but it's still there. People live there, and it's the most amazing place. And you can imagine these landscapes around about a house like that. It probably built up around a sort of tower house in the early 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, and then into the medieval times, and it's just kind of grown and grown and grown. It has all the hallmarks of a really, really old property. You see it with a tree-lined avenue going up, and it's got bare gates at the top, and these gates were shut in 1745 when Bonnie Prince Charlie, because they were Jacobites, the family are Jacobites basically, and he said these gates will open when another Jacobite king is on the Scottish throne. So these gates, as he went to the state, have been closed since 1745. These people have long memories, we're not going to open these gates. Yeah. So it's that kind of history. But
That's
so they build
awesome.
another avenue down, another entrance down to the house because the gates aren't open.
Yeah,
so anyway, it's all that kind of history that
That's
is fantastic.
amazing.
But I digress slightly, but. And these wonderful estates, they really are amazing. And they have the most amazing old trees, beech trees, sycamore trees, lime trees. There's one in Hursley Estate. It's over 500 years old, this tree, and it's in perfectly good condition. It's withstood all the storms of recent years. And it's amazing. So what we're trying to do with these estates is put the trees back, basically, put them into protective tree boxes, and they're not cheap. These will be a couple £100 per box. The tree's the cheapest part of it. Usually the trees, just a few pounds, but the post and rail fencing to go around it's another couple of £100. But if you put 10, 20, 30 or 40 of these through a parkland situation, it looks fantastic, and people love to see these, and they're highly visual, and they'll be there for hundreds of years, hopefully. If they can live to that age. So we're hoping to plant at least 5,000 trees along the river.
Nice.
There's, I think, 45 design landscapes. We're working with about 25 landowners. It's my job to go around and try and encourage them to participate, and we've been really quite good at it. And it's just wonderful to go back and see all these trees planted, a year later. So you could advise on it, and then they go off and do the work, and you come back and it's all done. It's just great.
Yeah.
It's just really rewarding.
It sounds, that's what I was thinking. I was like, that sounds like a great experience and a rewarding job. Yeah. So, and in addition to this tree planting effort, did I see on the website you offer grants for others to plant trees, or is that part of the same program?
No, that's another one. It's called the Borders Tree Grant Scheme.
Borders Tree Grant. That's what I saw. Yeah.
And that's an interesting one because that in its various guises, we change it. It's been going for the best part of 30 years, but we have to keep changing its name every 3 years to get the thing. As you can imagine, it's not always, funders don't always like the same thing, so they have to keep rolling with a different idea, but it's the same thing really underneath.
Yep, I understand how that goes.
It's so popular, you wouldn't believe. I mean, it was the first one in Scotland, really.
Wow.
And so we started off devising. It wasn't a huge amount of money, to be honest, at the time. It's still not a huge amount of money. It's only £1,000. Right? But we get 50, 60, 70, sometimes up to 100 applications a year. And it's just for that very thing. It's for, it's for hedgerow trees, it's for parkland trees, it's for trees along the river, it's for copses, it's for orchards, little things, that are below Forestry Commission type funding to make the bigger plantations, the commercial plantation. And it's so popular, the farmers will apply for it, communities will apply for it, schools will apply for it. So they go into school grounds, they go into communities, they go into big estates, small farms, big farms. It gets you out and about, and you don't have to see some lovely places. So really popular. And on the back of this project that we set up all these years ago, they've got a similar scheme running now in Dumfries and Galloway. That spawned a scheme over there. They've got one in South and East Ayrshire now, a very similar one. And now Aberdeenshire is looking at a similar one. So that's 4 different regions in Scotland that have come on the back of ours. Now we're just really proud of that. It's great to see people doing it, and getting a lot of pleasure from it. And over the years, there must be, I don't know how many trees will have planted under that project, but it'll be probably hundreds of thousands now.
Yeah,
over the years. Yeah.
Well, Derek, I want to be respectful of time. Before we transition into your call to action and our talk to Hope, is there anything else about the Tweed Forum or any other projects that we haven't touched on that are near and dear to you or important that you want to make sure you share about today before we kind of transition into your call to action?
Well, I think, just one thing really, and you mentioned Tom Allison there in Australia when we met up a few years ago. But I know we're passionate about living and working in this environment, but all of us in our office have travelled quite a bit. We have been to lots of places, and Australia, America, most places in Europe, and every time you go to conferences, events, you meet lots and lots of really interesting people.
Yeah.
And it was so funny, how we met up with Tom, because we were doing a sort of land use strategy pilot way back in 2013, 14, 15, and we're calling it the River Tweed Land Use Strategy Pilot. I thought, well, there must be somebody in the world doing something that weird, something similar. So we Googled it, and up came the River Tweed Land Use Strategy Pilot. Wait a minute.
Wait a second.
Wait a second. That's not right. And here it was in Australia, and we weren't aware, there was a River Tweed in Australia. And so we got in touch with Australia, and up came Tom and said, "Oh, you must come over and see us. We've got so much to show you." And so went out, of course, as you do, to Australia, and we spent a month in there. And Tom took a week off, and a week through work, and showed us round the catchment. He was so generous of his time. But what struck us was that we met his family and his children. It was just a wonderful experience. And the council was fantastic. But they showed us all around the catchment, and all the things they were showing us, we were having the same issues and challenges: diffuse pollution, flooding. I know his sea level rise. We had invasive species, loss of wildlife, loss of forests, species conservation, koala bears. We don't have them, obviously, but it's amazing. The other side of the world, exactly the same problem.
Yeah.
And it was really, really interesting. We still share knowledge and information. It's great.
Yeah.
And that happens the world over, doesn't it? You meet these people, and they're just, well, we're all on such a small planet here. We've got to look after it. We've really got to pull together to make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. I share your experience about having traveled and gone to different conferences, and there's a sense of this global connection when you're at these conferences, and you realize that, certainly particularly in more affluent communities, right? I mean, what you may be experiencing there in Scotland, and Tom in Australia, and me over here in the Pacific Northwest, we're all going to have something similar. Recognizing maybe challenges in a developing nation might be a bit more extreme or a little bit different, but there's threads of similarity running through all of our problems and all of our solutions. There's threads and connections through those too. And you talked about scalability a short time ago, and I that's such an important point you made. I wanted to draw attention back to it, that we kind of know, in many ways, humanity kind of know how to fix what we broke. We have the ideas and we have the knowledge to make things better. Now we just need to scale it up. We need the support of the governments. We need the funding support. We need the private sector to come along and change their ways. So it's, the hope, for the future, as bleak as it can look sometimes with climate change. And, we're doing this recording right now, and Los Angeles is on fire, right? I know. There's horrible things happening around the world.
Well,
but we know how to fix it. We just need people to come together and join us in this journey to do it. So I really applaud you and appreciate you and all your colleagues at the Tweed Forum for helping to lead your community, but help lead the world towards a better place. So thank you for all that you do.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that, Steve. But our daughter's funny you mentioned the West Coast of America, where you are, but in California. But our daughter's just come back last week from San Francisco on a holiday out there after Christmas, and they were quite surprised to see the beautiful country, magnificent, but the wildfires really shook them. It really did.
It's
really
crazy.
Did. So, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned also there about private money. You touched on their private money, and we're trying hard to bring more private money into the system, because there's just not enough public money at all to go there. So, we've got things like carbon markets for forestry. They're quite well versed. We're trying to get, there is well-versed markets in peatland restoration, peatland carbon as well. But what we're lacking, I think, is the biodiversity credit market, where it's just not there. And once they crack that nut, I think you'll get more private money coming in. But it's just how the big businesses can make a return on it. Yeah. And is that clean money that's coming in? You have to be very careful. Is it clean money? Where's the money coming from? So there's a lot of challenges, but we have to crack them, and I think we will. We're optimists. I think we will manage it eventually. It might take a crisis or two, like we're having, but I think they will rally eventually to this, the governments, hopefully, and things will be better.
Well, we'll keep pushing and doing our part, I'm sure. So, Derek, thank you so much for all this conversation. It's been just a joy, and I always give guests an opportunity to do a call to action, and I'm sure the folks listening to this or watching it are as inspired as I am by your story. So, what do you want them to do? What's your call to action now that we've got people, energized and ready to go do something? What should they go do?
I think from our perspective, it's just to try and encourage people to be more aware of the environment. Whether they're farmers, or whether they're school kids, or whether they're university students, or whether they're visitors there. Just try and engage as much as possible with the environment, because we feel that engaging with the environment, that will bring the enthusiasm and that sense of wonder that it really needs, because people, we find, tend not to do things because they're told to do it, or incentivized to do something. They need to have that inner feeling and inspiration to do it. They need to have that connection to nature, and it's only that connection to nature that will really change the mindset. And it is a mindset change that we can see coming. They have to want to do it from within.
Yeah.
So it's just engage, expose the children as much as possible to the environment when they're young, and get them enthused, and just engage with nature, get out there and engage, get away from the computer, engage with nature as much as possible. And we think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah. Love it. Love that answer. Thank you. So we talk about hope on this show. We talk about hard things like, Los Angeles burning, and peatlands and wetlands drying up, and all the challenges that we have and that we're facing. So I'd like to try to leave the show with that bit of hope to keep people inspired to go do the hard things that we have to go do. So and hope is this idea. It's not an emotion. It's those who study these types of things have made clear hope is not just a fluffy pink cloud kind of emotion. It's an actual necessity to move people forward into action, and it's this idea that you can have a vision for a better future. You have some steps to help you get there. You may not know all the steps, but you have a direction to walk in. And you feel like you have a sense of agency, like there's something you can do to help make this vision come to pass. So I ask guests these same 3 questions every time, because I love being inspired by the answers, and I hopefully the audience does too. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions about hope. Just give me your first instinctual answer. You don't have to think about it too long. Okay. So, all right, Derek. So the first question is, what is your vision for a better future? It could be for you personally, professionally, or for the world. What's your vision for a better future?
Well, I think professionally, I could answer that in 2 ways, I guess. One, professionally, and then personally. I think professionally, because we work with farmers and the environment's sphere, I think for us, the biggest challenge is just getting the authorities to link farming and forestry and conservation. If we can get society to link these 3 together in a really meaningful way, and for everybody to pull together, then that would be professionally our greatest hope, that we could integrate farming. Integration is probably the key word. If we can all integrate farming, forestry, and conservation, that would be a really good thing. So the hope is that would happen one day, because it's not happening so well at the moment.
Yeah.
So that would be the hope. And the reason, I guess.
That's my next question. Why? Why is that important?
I think it's important for the next generation, frankly. We have 3 children. We have a son and 2 daughters, and they're all grown up and away from home now, but we're not grandparents yet, but hopefully we'll be blessed with that in time. But, it's to them that you're thinking about what kind of world are they facing. So if we can get people to work together, then they will have a better future, because, everybody loves the environment. Everybody wants to see wildlife about. It's really important, not just for their own mental and physical well-being, that there's a healthy environment there. It's really important for the economy. I mean, they really do need to have a really good, sustainable environment, because farming depends on having that, and the economy depends on having that. Business depends on that. It's people think it's the other way around. The economy is just something you can treat when the business is doing well. No, the economy has to be dependent entirely on the environment being in a really healthy place. So I think for our children's sake and our grandchildren's sake, we need to get this to work quickly.
Yeah. So you had a personal hope as well? Is that? tied in differently from your professional?
Yeah, I think the personal one would be for family, for your children, because just the stage in my life that I'm at, I just, you've done what you can, but and it's a very small beer, but hopefully in a small way, our group of people that we're wonderful people to work with, that we see, and like yourselves, that we visit and communicate with and share knowledge with, that it's a smallish community, but it's growing, and it's just wonderful. It's really inspiring to hear everybody's stories. It really, and I think what you're doing is just tremendous, because I've been looking at one or two of the past videos, and they really are all inspiring. They really are all inspiring.
Yeah.
So, and it's amazing what people do and what drives them, and what, the outcomes. It's quite incredible, and how positive they all are. That's the real bonus, that they do see a hope, they do see a future, and that's really important to bring out all these things, because we can do this. We can do it.
Yeah, we can. And thank you for that compliment. I'm inspired by you and all the guests I've had on. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity that people like you say yes to speak with me, because it leaves me just filled, with energy and hope for the future.
I think it's really important what you do, Stephen, because at the end of the day, I was thinking about us when when you first approached us about story, stories sustain us, and it wasn't until actually this moment in time when you came to us and said, well, that's what we're effectively doing, aren't we? We're all telling stories, although we didn't maybe appreciate it. That's kind of what we're all doing. We're telling stories, and that's how we're communicating.
Yeah,
and that's really a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. People, as you were saying, they respond with their hearts from the inside, and what motivates someone is not necessarily facts and figures, because you can argue about facts and figures, but if you tell a story that touches someone on the inside, they're going to be with you. They're going to walk with you.
It's got to come from the heart, and compassion. It's all about compassion, being sensitive to other people's feelings, and taking people with you, and be understanding of their situation. So it's all about that, isn't it? Yeah. And the world needs a bit more of that. So
yes, it does. Yes, it does. So Derek, the third question, I want to make sure I get you on this last question about hope. So you've painted a vibrant, beautiful picture of a future where we're integrating our farming and our conservation and our land management and our economics, and people are compassionate and they're caring for one another and caring for the environment. The last question is, imagine that's the world we're actually living in right now. How does that make you feel?
Well, once I've picked myself up off the floor, but no, I think we will get there. We will get there, Stephen. But yeah, I think it'd make me feel great. I'll tell you why. Because I think, in a very small way, in organizations like ourselves, it is a challenge. It's a struggle, to get through the days, sometimes the weeks, because there's so much pressure on you, and the team, just to find the money to to deal with contractors, to get the work done in time for the money goes. It's a lot of pressure, and I always admire my colleagues, because despite the challenges, they always manage to do it, and it's just great. So yeah, I think they would feel rewarded if this all came together in an integrated way. Then I think the very small part that we're playing in this very small corner of the world, you'd feel, well, we have ultimately left our mark, and that's what I see driving around the countryside. You can see the woodlands that you planted 10, 20, 30 years ago. You can see the ponds that were put in. You can see the hedgerows. You can see the landscape has changed because of you being there, and you can take your children along, and show them, and you see the wildlife associated with them, and that is so rewarding. It is so rewarding. You can't put a value in that.
Right.
There's no price me putting that. It's just joy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is beautiful, Derek. Thank you so much for sharing your vision for a better future, and I'm going to do my part to help you get there, because that joy is something that I want to see and feel and experience too. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, Stephen, and look after yourself. And if you're ever in this neck of the woods again, do drop in and see us.
I will let you know. I'm planning it. I figured it out. But yeah, my wife and I want to get there. So it may be a few years, but I'll look you up. Well,
anytime, Stephen. Right. Good to speak to you.
Derek, thank you. Take care.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Bye-bye.
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 What an incredible conversation with Derek Robeson. His work with the Tweed Forum highlights just how essential collaboration is when it comes to conservation. From balancing the needs of agriculture with environmental restoration, to tackling climate change challenges, to creating opportunities for ecotourism and education, Derek and his colleagues are proving when communities come together, real progress happens. Hearing about efforts to restore native habitats, manage invasive species, and engage the next generation in conservation is both inspiring and reassuring to me. The River Tweed is a perfect example of how history, culture, and nature are deeply intertwined, and how protecting our natural spaces isn't just about preserving landscapes. It's about preserving livelihoods, heritage, and a sustainable future for all. Now, this conversation brought back some powerful memories for me. In 2017, I had the privilege of being in Brisbane, Australia, when the San Antonio River, River Tweed, and Pasig River were all finalists for the International River Prize. It was one of the greatest honors of my career to accept the award on behalf of the San Antonio River and all those who dedicated their time, energy, and expertise to restoring and protecting the San Antonio River system. But as I said in my acceptance speech that night, I wouldn't have wanted to be a judge deciding the winner. The work being done on the River Tweed and the Pasig River was equally impressive and critically important. Now, to me, that memory serves as a powerful reminder. Despite the never-ending stream of bad news, there are incredible people like Derek doing amazing work every day to right the wrongs of the past and build a more sustainable future for all. This isn't about ignoring the ugliness in the world or promoting toxic positivity. It's about honestly facing the challenges we see and refusing to give in to cynicism. There are massive success stories happening all around us. They just don't always make the headlines like the dumpster fires do. And that's one of the reasons why I do this show, because I get to speak to inspiring people like Derek Robeson, and I hope their stories inspire you too. Now, I want to thank Derek once again for joining me today and for his dedication to conservation, environmental education, and community engagement. The work he's doing along the River Tweed is making a real difference. If you've been inspired by today's episode, I encourage you to take action in your own community. Get involved in local conservation projects, support farmers and landowners who are implementing sustainable practices, educate yourself and others about the impact of climate change on waterways. And if you have the opportunity, get outside and explore a river near you. You might just find a deeper connection to the natural world. So thank you for being a part of Stories Sustain Us. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share this episode with your friends and family, follow the show, and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to join me for the next episode, releasing on February 25th, where we'll explore the work of a national nonprofit that's empowering communities across the United States. I'll be diving into a fascinating conversation about the profound impact of storytelling on community building and individual identity. You're not going to want to miss it. So you can check the next episode of Stories Sustain Us out on February 25th at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.